Hello and welcome to the Teacher Boss Show. My name is Florence Okwisogu, Teacher Empowerment Coach. And on the Teacher Boss Show, what we do is we have conversations that will empower teachers to become the boss and CEO of their health, happiness, and life. So today I am really excited to introduce Annabelle Jeffcoat and Judith Aday, who will be helping me to talk about physical well-being in 2022. So physical well-being for teachers and how we can really thrive in that area of our life this year. So welcome, ladies. Welcome to the Teacher Boss Show.
Thank you so much for having me, Florence.
You're welcome. So I just would like to take a moment for you to introduce yourself. So if I start with you, Annabelle, just a brief intro. Who are you? What's your relationship to teaching?
So my name's Annabelle, as you're aware. I'm a teacher's work-life balance coach. So I help teachers to reduce anxiety and switch off guilt-free and enjoy that work-life balance that they desire. So my ultimate goal with balance for teachers is to reduce stress-related illness within the education sector. So every morning I wake up and think about ways that I can reduce stress, not only for myself, but those around me, and what I love to call the ripple effect, allow it to spread through the education sector. For me personally, I've worked in the fitness and health industry for about 10 years now. You stop counting at 10, don't you? Just round. You just go, oh, I'll just round it. Approximately 10 plus years. But I grew up in a family with teachers, and a lot of the teachers' personality traits and behaviors I inherited. And by the time I was in my early 20s, I was having dissociative seizures from stage 5 burnout. So my body had completely said, no, I don't want to stay in reality anymore. I just need to get out. Any stress, bright lights, low blood sugars, you name it. My body retreated. Even though I was a high performer, I was a perfectionist, and I was getting A grades, first class degree, all the rest of it that people think is the right way to do things. But living, I was not doing. So I kind of sat back and a couple of years ago now and thought, do I want to run a fitness studio, or is there a certain group of people out there that I could really make a difference to? And because I'm not a teacher directly, I've taught in primary schools, after school clubs, things like that, but I'm very honest in the sense I'm not actually in classes, but I work with various teachers throughout the world. So it's like every education system's different, every school is different, so I work more with the individual. And for me, a lot of the reason why I want to prevent stress-related illness is because I don't want the next generation to inherit that story that we have to be hard workers and not switch off. So a big part of choosing to work with teachers is because teachers stand in front of 30 plus children every single day, and the way they behave and the subconscious behaviors that teachers have impact the next generation phenomenally without even realizing. And I'm living proof of that because I inherited so many of those traits without realizing. And I had a fantastic family, a great upbringing. And technically you'd look at it and you'd say, wow, but yet what I learned as a child growing up were not the traits of a successful life to live, but rather I learned the work hard, keep drilling, keep pushing, you must work before you live. And that wasn't all taught in family. I learned a lot of that at school as well, because I got praised very much for my grades. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Thank you. There's a lot there, Annabelle.
Yeah, I was trying to shorten that down.
You've got it down. Well done. Yeah. So you've raised so many interesting points, and I loved what you said there about the fact that teachers they do sit or stand in front of 30 odd teachers, and that's maybe if you've got a one group primary school, that's the cohort that you have. But if you are maybe in secondary or FE, you can see up to 150 students in any given week. So definitely I can understand what you're saying about that. An amazing way to help to that kind of filtering down effect that you spoke about. So yay. That's great. Judith, I'd
Yes.
love to hear about who you are and your relationship to teaching.
Okay, so for me, I'm a primary school teacher and I've been for the last 17 years.
Okay.
I'm still a primary school teacher. I was teaching permanently before until about 3 years ago when I chose to become a supply teacher instead. Now, in between being a full-time teacher, I did do supply work here and there, with having children. So yeah, that's what I do mainly. But in addition to that, in the last 1.5 years or so, I've um, I've decided to utilize my experience with my health and well-being, and to team up with a nutritionist and coach to help people find that health balance in their lives. So it's helping with exercise and diet and their diet in general, so that they are not having to diet and fluctuating weight or anything like that, but just getting the education they need to eat well. Because from my own experience, I realized that food had a lot to do with my mental well-being. And until I took control of my diet and how I was being, I did not find success. I was always miserable and feeling unfulfilled. But when I got control of my diet and I got the education I needed to eat well, I realized that it affected my mental well-being. I had mental health issues, and food did amazing things with my mental health. So that's what I bring aboard, and I help people, professionals, including teachers, to be able to eat well and live well and be happy. That's what
Fantastic.
I do.
Fantastic. You've touched upon so many great things. I love that you mentioned the relationship between food and well-being. I mean, that can be from a physical perspective, but can also be from a psychological perspective. I know, for example, that Annabelle, that you've touched upon previously, how we can have a particular relationship with food and how that impacts on us. I know that that's been an experience that I've had. Nobody can take me away from chocolate. That's like my thing. But I understand how food can play such a big part in our well-being. For myself, I have an autoimmune condition that I successfully manage now through lifestyle changes and diet changes. But prior to that, when I didn't know anything about the role of food, I was in excruciating pain and discomfort. And quite honestly, I wished myself dead. That was how horrific my life was. But when I discovered what foods worked well and didn't work well with my body, all those symptoms, they basically started to fall away, and I was able to get my my health and my well-being back in check. So yeah, I'm a big believer in diet, and I know that you do talk about gut well-being as well, Judith, which I
Yeah,
think is
definitely.
super important, and not a lot of people pay attention to that. So I'm really excited about where this conversation can go to. So many amazing places. So, I guess what I would like to start off with is the whole concept of well-being. There are so many different definitions for well-being, but when you think about well-being and you're maybe linking it to your journey, what does well-being mean to you? Annabelle, let's start with you.
For me, it's all in the being.
Mm-hmm.
Like I personally would just switch the words around and say being well. So being well in any given moment. For me, everything I coach, everything I do is bespoke because it's about the individual. So well-being to one person, no wonder there's so many definitions, is completely different to another, depending on your situation. So when people say to me, I want a work-life balance, I always come back with the question, what does that look like for you? Because one person's work-life balance, if they have tremendous gut health and they're physically in a good place, is probably longer hours than someone like yourself, Florence, when you were struggling with an autoimmune condition, you weren't really sure how to manage it, was probably a lot less working time because your body was under so much stress and strain. So for me personally, I think I would just flip the words around, and it's being well. Asking yourself the question, how can I be well today? Whatever that looks like for you.
I love that, being well. Awesome. And Judith, what's your definition of well-being?
Yeah, I must say I love Annabelle's definition. It's so simple and very easy to understand. But for me, because of how much food has played, how much an important role food has played in my well-being, I put a lot on being healthy. And it's a state of being comfortable in yourself, feeling happy, being satisfied with where you are in life, and being healthy. And that would mean something different for everybody, like Annabelle is saying. So yeah, so what makes you happy, comfortable, and healthy?
Okay, yeah, so a holistic approach then, and also recognizing that it is really down to each individual and their particular situation. So I guess let's move on to physical well-being now, and physical health, because a lot of teachers, they do experience stress, chronic stress, and often that can lead to burnout, and burnout can lead to triggering mental health issues or chronic health issues or autoimmune conditions. How is physical well-being important, and why is it important to teachers? Why do you think teachers should really focus on this? Whoever wants to go first. I know it's a lot.
Oh, Judith, why don't you go first for this one?
Okay, that's fine. So why should teachers focus on well-being?
Physical well-being.
Physical well-being.
Yeah.
Right. So teaching as a profession is a very, very physical thing. You're dealing with very energetic people, young people. It could be, they could be older or younger. I deal with young children, and they are very, very active. So, it's very important to be fit, and we know how much inconsistency can affect children, especially primary school children. So for primary school children, they are used to having the same teacher in the classroom every day, all year. And if your physical well-being is not where it needs to be, and you're falling ill very easily, that can impact on the children, because supply teachers and teachers that don't normally teach them will have to fill in the gaps. And that can affect their learning. They get very restless. It's hard to build routines for them, because it's so important for them at that stage. So physical well-being, especially if you look at after very young ones, is absolutely important, because they do need the consistency in their development and learning. So I'm looking at it from a primary school teacher's.
Okay. Annabelle, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think Judith's correct. Like, it does have an impact on the world around you. And it also has an internal impact as well. So, I sometimes put it in a way that we are more than computers, because we have the emotional literacy and things like that as well. But if you were to run a computer constantly, it's going to eventually run out of battery. Like, it can only run for so long. And human bodies are very similar. Like, when I look at a human body, I'm looking at the metabolic pathways, like how a body is functioning. And the great thing about, and when we say physical wellness, and I guess partly that's active, like being active, and partly that's through physical nutritional wellness, so your internal organs and things like that. And if we look at, so I have an analogy called BREAK, or an acronym called BREAK, and physical illnesses and physical sort of struggling with the body are signs. Like, they're giving you signs. It's a bit like when we get sick, we sometimes go, I'm sick, so I've got all of these signs, but actually that's a sign your immune system's working. Like, if you're sneezing, that's your body trying to get rid of something. If you are physically unwell or physically strained, I'm a believer, and everything I coach in is about learning to listen to your body and learning to listen in any given moment. So all of my programs that I run are coaching strategies on how do you listen to you, because one of my beliefs is that I don't want to hold your hand for life, right?
Yeah.
I can't. I physically, if you think about how many teachers there are in the world, I physically cannot hold everyone's hand for life. So my intention is, how do I show people that no matter what happens in your life, you can take care of you, you can listen. And if you're physically getting ailments in your body, if you're regularly getting, it's actually got a name, it's called leisure sickness. And what happens is, at the end of term, your adrenaline as a teacher begins to drop, because in your head you're thinking, oh, okay, it's a holiday soon, fantastic, we're going on holidays. Now the thing with your body is that adrenaline was stopping you from getting sick because it was pumping at that high load. Now adrenaline links to cortisol, and we all probably have heard of cortisol and the stress hormone.
Yeah.
So what happens is your adrenaline drops, but your cortisol stays high, which means you're then susceptible to catch anything and everything. And I'm sure Judith knows, as a primary school teacher, that at the end of term, children who are sick, which wouldn't have normally bothered you, suddenly you're catching like throat problems, chest problems, head colds, and you spend the whole of the first few weeks of the holiday sick, or few days, or however it is. And my dad used to get it all the time. I used to, every holiday he'd be sick. We just knew he would be. Like, we just guaranteed he'd be sick the first couple of weeks. And it's actually, in literature, there's scientific studies on it, and it's to show that, you know, if you actually looked after your physical well-being for yourself throughout term, instead of that all or nothing cognitive distortion of I'm either 100% in term and at work, or I'm 100% on holiday.
Yeah.
And rather than doing that, if we actually paced ourselves and we learnt to listen to our body's needs in any given moment, and supported ourselves with gut health and physical activity, then we would be able to get to the end of term, get to holiday, and just enjoy it. And actually have that time for ourselves, rather than being in bed sick. So for me, physical well-being is consistency, as Judith said, is being consistent, not only for others, but for yourself. And it doesn't mean, you know, nowadays I do reformer Pilates, I do CrossFit, so I'm quite intense with my training. But if you'd gone back sort of like 5-6 years ago, I probably would struggle to walk. Like, there was a year where I was banned from exercise 10 years ago because I would have a seizure. Like, it was too much physically for my body. But nowadays I know how to manage my body in a way that I can do more and actually still feel good. So I think everyone's in a different place.
I just want to hold on to that last thing that you said, because I think that's an amazing catchphrase. Do more and still feel good. Wouldn't you agree, Judith? That's basically what we want when we think about physical well-being and our capacity, and really what thriving is about, moving the needle bit by bit to build up our own capacity. And dare I even use the word resilience, because I'm not a great fan of the word resilience, I have to say. So physical well-being then is a big umbrella topic within itself, so it seems. So we've got consistency, and we've got listening to your body, but you've also both touched upon the gut and diet, so the role of food, and that can be physical and psychological. You've spoken about exercise and being active. What else would you say goes underneath the umbrella of physical well-being that we might not kind of pay attention to?
I was going to say, for me, like, physical is just the physical is the body, like the physical body, and how we take care of the physical ailment, body parts. So, you know, just your organs and your physical body. Like, for me, that is physical. The other areas that I tend to work in as a holistic coach is spiritual, as well as looking at environmental as well. So, you know, for me, physical, environmental, spiritual, these are all really important elements, and they all work together when you learn to listen to yourself. But for me, it doesn't go beyond that. physical is just like the how you move and things you eat to consume in your body, and it's the physical shell, as it were, that you are living in.
Okay, so let's talk about then. Let's talk about, so we're focusing on the body and everything pertaining to our physicality. What tips would you give to teachers in relation to building up their physical capacity and building their physical well-being? Judith, I'd
Yes.
like to start with you.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so building your physical body, includes the mind, definitely, and also digestion, is very important because that's part of your physiology. And the gut, 70% of our immune system lies in the gut. If we can take care of the gut, we can take care of our whole physical being, and that would include exercise as well. So for me, the gut plays a major role in my physical well-being. And food is what the gut depends on to feed our whole body, our whole physical body. So we have microbes in our gut that feed on the food, and we must maintain a balance between the good bacteria and the bad bacteria, and that's what we call the microbiome of our gut. Now, the microbiome of our gut needs to be in a state where the good bacteria is way more than the bad bacteria, because it's the good bacteria that's going to keep us healthy. Now, the food we eat will either feed the good bacteria or the bad bacteria. And that's why we must pay attention to the quality of food we put in our body. And that's why I'm very strong on that part when it comes to our physical well-being. So when we pay attention to our gut and we're able to feed those good bacteria, our immune system is in a much stronger place.
So sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
So what do you mean by pay attention to our guts? If somebody, has no understanding of gut health and the importance of gut health and the relationship between gut health and, our overall well-being, what can they do to start paying attention to their gut in practical sense?
Okay, that's a very good question. Yes, so it's very important that we do cut down on processed food as much as possible. If we can cut it out completely, that'll be great. But every now and again, if we give ourselves a treat, that's fine. Because we've taken time to build up the good bacteria, you're not going to suddenly ruin everything just by having a biscuit or, having extra whatever. But it's all about consistency. So it's cutting down on the sugar we are taking and the processed food, because those are the very things that feed the bad bacteria and kill off the good ones. So I know it's hard, but it's a gradual thing. I didn't just start off just eating very well. I had to gradually do that. My body used to crave sugar, and yet my glucose level was always normal or even low. And I was always saying, I can't believe how much sugar my body can take. And still, if I didn't take sugar, I would start shaking. That's how much my body was so dependent. And now I can take tea without sugar and I've got the best energy. So your body is going to crave it so badly if you try to stop suddenly. So it's a gradual process. You just cut down gradually, 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 until you are able to completely take it out. So that's what it means to feed your good bacteria. It's a gradual process.
Yeah. And I know that there are other aspects to, developing your gut health. I know that you can supplement as well. That's
Yes,
another
yes,
way
yes.
that you can go. Um, But it reminds me of my own experience again, because, you know, because my condition was so rare, it actually took 6 years for me to be diagnosed. So you can imagine, during that length of time when I had no help from any other avenue, I had to really learn for myself. That's why I do relate to what you said about the education component, Judith. That is so important and so empowering. And that's when I began to learn about gut health and gut permeability and things like that. And one of the things that I discovered was I was reacting to certain foods, but I didn't know that I was reacting to certain foods, and I had all these weird symptoms. I was reacting to gluten, and I was reacting to dairy, and I had what you probably would call a wheat belly. And I had really bad skin, you know, so many different things. I had weight from inflammation. But when I began to listen to my body, as you said, Annabelle, and cut out the foods that were triggering an immune response, even though it was low grade immune response for me, then those symptoms began to wane. They began to go away. So yeah, I'm really in support of what you said about the role of the gut and what we eat, and how that can also cause problems in the lining of the gut wall as well, can't it, Judith and
Yeah,
Annabelle?
that's true. So what you were describing there sounded to me like leaky gut.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah.
your gut gets inflamed, and then it allows all these bad bacteria to seep into your blood, and then you start reacting, and you get what we call autoimmune response.
Mm,
So if we can feed, and that's all caused by inflammation, isn't it?
mm,
So
mm,
if we can feed our body with the good stuff, it reduces the inflammation, because the good bacteria will be healing your body. And that's why I'm a strong believer of food being medicine.
mm.
Now, food can be medicine to your body as well as poison. It just depends on what you put in it, you know? So, yeah, very good point there.
Yeah. So great. So learning to listen to your body and thinking about what you put into your body. So foods that you are eating, and if we can move on to yourself, Annabelle, do you have anything to add on to this discussion?
Yeah, I think everything you guys have just said is really valuable. I went through a very similar situation. So, um, when I started to stop having the seizures and actually started to feel the fear and anxiety, because at that point, I think about for 2 years, I never cried. I didn't, and my body had got to that point where it just it wasn't emotionally responding at all anymore.
Mm,
So when it got to the point where I was actually feeling again, I'd gone through a mindset coach myself, who I then qualified with afterwards. Um, and nutrition was my next step. So my next step was like, okay, I'm getting stomach pain every time I eat. I feel bloated. I had terrible acne. Everything you were just saying then, Florence, very
mm,
similar. My stomach just could not tolerate. And I think what we get to appreciate as well is that when you start changing, people around you will react to it because they know
mm,
you for who you are in that moment. And I'm sure you ladies both had a similar experience that when you started to say, okay, I'm going to cut out. And if you have depressive symptoms, actually
mm,
dairy and gluten are the first two is recommended to try to reduce or cut out,
mm,
because they are the two kind of strongest ones that can and really trigger problems with depression.
mm,
And when I started to say, I'm going to cut out sugar, refined sugar, and gluten and dairy, and I started to do it, it was a challenge because everyone close to me, it's like a break of loyalty in a way. Like you stop eating the way you ate when you grew up with your family, and you're going to dinner saying, "Okay, actually, I'm going to eat something different to you."
mm,
And the egos do not like that. So I think mindset is really important, and
mm,
having a community around you, whether you decide to go to a coach that you resonate with, a nutritional advisor, whether you decide to just have a group of other teachers that you work with and you do it together. I think having that support network helps a lot. I invested a lot into having people, because I was like, I just need to know. And I was so far gone that there was nothing. I remember crying down the phone at my nutritionist and screaming because I just couldn't how do I put it? My body just went into complete reaction mode because I was like, there's nothing, I can't eat anything. Everything is reacting.
Yeah.
And you know, and Florence, you're like, yeah, I remember that episode.
Yeah.
I had one of those. And I think you need that support, but also a big caveat is I tried some of the like detoxes that people recommended at the time. Don't do it. If you are highly stressed or you're having autoimmune responses, get a professional and ensure that you do it slowly, like Judith said, because if you try and do the latest fad in January as a diet plan, the emotions that come out are horrendous. Because if you've not been going through your emotions and you've been blocking them, when you start to detox, you don't just detox in terms of physical. Everything emotional will come out, and it's heavy, right? You do get to feel it. You do get to feel it to heal it. That's one of my sayings. You know, it's important to feel it to heal it, but do it in an environment you feel supported in, and you feel connected with people, whether that's people outside of your current environment or whether that's people close to you. But just pulling on what Judith was saying, one way, so I have a strategy called Tweak of the Week. And the reason why I do Tweak of the Week is because of that slow process. And when we talk about food earlier, Florence, you mentioned about chocolate. It's not chocolate, right? Okay, so chocolate for a lot of people, you know, in society, we talk about chocolate being a treat, and we talk about any food you are finding it difficult to get out of your life has a meaning to you. So your mindset is just as important. So when I used to crave chocolate a lot, I don't anymore. Like, I'm able to eat raw chocolate occasionally because I want it, or I choose to have it, or I know it's that time of the month where magnesium's getting low. So I kind of want a little bit more. Mine's all sugar-free. All the chocolate I eat now is sugar-free. But it took me a gradual change. I used to be someone that loved white chocolate, could be more full of sugar, right? So when I sat back one day and I did this, and you guys who are listening, you can try this. Before you eat that thing you keep going for, check in with yourself and listen to what your body is trying to tell you. Because I took the chocolate and I was like, I looked at the chocolate and I was like, what is it? We're all going to want chocolate soon, right? But I was looking at it and I was like, what is it? And I was like, it's organized, it's regimented. Like, that's what I see when I look at it. And when it's in my mouth, I feel comfort. Like when it's melting in my mouth and I'm eating it, I feel comfort. And I realized that I only reached for chocolate when I felt disorganized. Yeah. So actually, it wasn't the chocolate I was after. I was after feeling organized. And so when I started to actually stop and go, right, I'm craving a load of chocolate, where am I feeling disorganized? I was able to then work on the actual thing rather than having that comfort of something that I'd learned was a comfort if something had gone wrong or something was just feeling messy. It felt organized. So any food you have, I just want to put that caveat in there, is there will be a deeper meaning. So some things you'll be able to let go of, and that's fine. But I've worked with clients who have attached certain foods to love. Like, they remember going home, going to their nan's house and their nan giving them loads of sweets. And it's like going to their subconscious. It's like saying, okay, I'm going to take away all the love from your life, right? You're going to put up a fight, right?
Yeah,
you're going to crave it more than you can imagine. So we have to move that meaning. We have to tweak it in a way that shifts gradually. And it doesn't have to be that complicated. If you don't have a coach with you guiding you through, you could just go to your shops. And what I did through my channel, and I don't know if you ladies did it as well, every time I went to the shop, I picked one thing in my basket that I could probably do without, and I looked for something that was similar. So I would look at the ingredients and the labels, and I'd look for like one which had a little less sugar in it. Or I'd look for a different brand that was maybe a bit better, or something that I could tweak it with that I wouldn't feel the difference. Because if you leave a gaping hole, like Judith was saying a moment ago, you're gonna really struggle. Like, it's your motivation, it will just go. But just to finish on that topic, Florence, one thing I learned, I can't take ownership for it, I learned it on a course a few years back, but to help those listening in terms of how do I tweak, what do I tweak, there is an acronym called CRAP, right? CRAP foods, right? And it just means carbonated drinks, So if you're drinking carbonated drinks,
Mm-hmm.
that should be. R is refined sugar. I know today we've talked a lot about that, but foods that have refined sugars. Alcohol. I know a lot of teachers love a glass of wine in the
They
evenings.
do. They do.
You do not have to just ditch it. Again, it's going to mean something to you,
Mm-hmm.
so be careful. And if you are struggling with alcohol, reach out to a professional. There's lots of support groups out there.
Mm-hmm.
But alcohol is another one that really the gut health struggles with, and processed foods.
Yeah.
So hopefully that helps in terms of what am I tweaking, what am I ridding out of my diet? Gradually and slowly, crap foods, right? If we can rid those, you will start to feel the difference.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Annabelle. Lots of really good information there. So we've spoken about quite a lot, and we've spoken about the role of the gut. We've spoken about food and making changes, small changes consistently over time and beginning to see the benefits. We've spoken about how a lot of the symptoms that we're experiencing are a result of I guess behaviors that we're doing, but we're not really aware of how they're having an impact on us, and how our mindset can have a role in that because of the way a teacher thinks, but also mindset after the fact when we are trying to change, how that can come in and influence us. I've definitely been there and experienced that. Do you have anything that you want to add around mindset, Judith? What have you found in relation to people maybe who want to change their diet? Because I know that that can be a struggle to suddenly find that you have to go from eating one way to another way. Just to jump in again, I know I've just asked you a question, just to jump in again and share a little bit about my own experience. I think there was definitely some grieving and some mourning involved in that transition, especially around gluten, because everything seems to be, when I say to people I don't eat gluten, they're like, what do you eat there? There's plenty of food there, but it's just like mind blowing. And even members of my family, they still really struggle to know what to make for me. So often they just bring a whole load of like raw ingredients and they say, here you go, you do it. But what have you found, Judith?
Yes, so yeah, you mentioned something very important. You mentioned supplements earlier, and then Annabelle talked about community. And that's why when I went on the journey of changing my diet and my lifestyle and how I was being my mental, how I was thinking, I did that all by myself. And I had to do my own research because when I went to the GP, he didn't have a clue, or they didn't have a clue what I was on about. They didn't know what was wrong with me. I did all the blood tests I could possibly do, and everything was fine. And it felt like, I was the one making stories out of nothing. And I knew very well that there was something not right about me. It later on developed into panic attacks and anxiety. But it started off as just building so much intolerances to food. And I didn't understand. I was having palpitations at the time. They were so new to me. I didn't even know they were called palpitations. I suffered burnout without even knowing I was suffering from burnout because I had not had the education prior to that. And I didn't even realize that I'd actually suffered trauma at the age of 16. It was when everything fell out of hand and I was having anxiety. I couldn't drive. I thought that the car was going to capsize every time I try and drive it. If I stepped on the brake, it would look like I was going to have an accident. And I'm thinking, am I going crazy? That was when I went to the GP and said, okay, you need CBT. Go and see a therapist. Okay, so it was through speaking to the therapist, and they asked me so many questions about how I grew up, what events happened in my lifetime that I begin to put all the pieces together. Now, the reason for me, for now, for what I do, I've partnered with a nutritionist. It's a celebrity nutritionist who has written their book, and they are very well known in the US especially. And I've teamed up with someone who is very qualified to give that support to people, because I never benefited from that kind of support, and it took a lot of determination to get to where I was. And not everybody can do that. You know, people do need support to go through what they are going through and to overcome what they want to overcome. So we have what we call a Nitro Nation. So Nitro
Put
Nation
the
is
link
all
for that. I'll just put it up.
okay.
Yeah.
So Nitro Nation is a community of people who are looking or seeking better health. So they've developed all these habits that they want to overcome, but they can't do it on their own because it's just so difficult doing it on your own. So we are a community of people with coaches and nutritionists and experts and people who have been through a program that we call Nitro Nutrition. And it's that, you know, you're able to reset your body for 21 days with support. However long that 21 days take you is down to you, because we've all come in from we are all having different starting points. So some will be able to reset their body in 21 days. Some will not be able to reset their body in 21 days. And that's still okay. We all take you on that journey, and we all share our stories and struggles and support each other that way. So it's a community that people can join on their, they can like the page that I've just come up, and you will get free support with your exercise regime, whether you want to build your muscles or you want to lose weight. There will be exercise there free for you to access. There will be recipes there that you can access free of charge. And you will also get education from world experts around your health and gut. And also the supplements that you mentioned. So trying to overcome a habit can be very, very difficult. And that's where natural supplements come in, because your body needs the nutrients it needs to fight the inflammation that have built up over so many years. And trying to cut out those habits is going to take a while. So supplements help you to start regaining your health. So we can provide you with the supplements that your body will need to help you on that journey as well.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll just quickly put up that page again, Nitro Nutrition Life, on Facebook. Thank you, Judith. One thing that we haven't touched upon, Annabelle, I wonder if you can speak into this. We haven't really spoken about being active and exercise. From my perspective, this is an area that I know that I've struggled with because of exercise intolerance, but there's always been a desire to be active. So I went prior to falling ill, I was very active, and then developed an autoimmune condition, finding that I just physically couldn't be as active anymore. But I also know with teachers, there's this whole thing about time, just finding the time to be active. What do you have to say about those 2 points, finding the time to be active and also trying to be active when you're finding that physically it's difficult for you to be?
Yeah, so in terms of like, I don't want to get too sciencey because it's just it's you don't need to be. These things are very, very simple when you break it down. But there is an element called epigenetics, and what that means is above the DNA. So some of us inherit more likelihood due to our DNA and the way it processes of being anxious, right? So we could potentially have genetically inherited it and not just from traumas. Although every single person on this planet has childhood traumas, right? It doesn't mean they are extreme traumas. It just means that in that moment as a child, you perceived something in a certain way that then logged as a story and belief in your mind. And then now subconsciously it creates your behaviors. So we don't change until we choose to change something. So anything you do comes back to motivational mindset, because unless you are able to work on your mind, it's going to be very difficult to shift yourself into a growth mindset. And I know that a lot of primary school teachers now, fixed mindset and growth mindset. And I've even had people that have been on my program, they've come out the other side and they went, how did I not know how to apply this stuff? And yet I teach it to the kids, right? How did I not? And I went, well, it's because it's very easy to say these things and teach these things, but to do it is a journey. And it's an experience. And when you start to tackle your deeper beliefs, that is different. And we were joking around at the beginning with Florence about saying the word I've been busy, right? Before we came on live today. And language is powerful. So I hear a lot of teachers say to me, I have no time. And the biggest thing, a lot of my clients come back to me and say, they're like, I keep hearing your voice in my head. And I keep going, is that 100% true? And I'm like, yeah, right? Because your beliefs that you've created, repetition, authority, and impact. If you keep saying I'm busy, you will always feel busy, but you're not being specific. Are you 100% always busy? Or are there actual moments where you have 10, 15 minutes here or there? Now, if you don't actually have 15, 10 minutes here or there where you're sat down, and sometimes I ask this question, they're like, yeah, I watched Netflix for about 3 hours last night. And you're like, well, then are you 100% always busy? Because that is still a choice. So when you start to look at a bird's eye view, you might go, oh, okay, actually, I kind of could be more productive in these areas. So I have one teacher that said, my marking takes forever, and she was struggling with the kind of getting the kids to mark. It just didn't feel quite right for her. So I asked her the question. I went, okay, cool. So right now you have a belief that you should mark every single book, right? So I'm curious, what if you did your group peer marking in the class, right? And then you went home and just briefly went over those books. How much time does it take you to mark the books? And she went, well, about 1 to 2 hours, right? I went, okay, cool. So how long does it take you to flick through those books after the class has gone through it? She went, maximum 15, 20 minutes. I went, you've just saved yourself time, right? But you've made an agreement with yourself, because you're not ready to just do the group class marking, right? You're at that stage where you're like, doesn't quite feel good yet. In the future, she'll be able to go, okay, I'm fine with them just doing it because I know it's okay, right? I've actually lent into it. So when it comes to physical exercise, one, it's how you physically feel, okay? So I see some people, and I used to be the same, that will go, right, I'm exhausted, I'm stressed out, I'm going to go train for a marathon. Are you mad? Right? Like, are you crazy? Right? And the reason why I say that, right? And even those words, okay, it depends what those words mean to you. But when because for me, and this is what I say by your perception of the world. Now, some people love training for a marathon, and I say, good for you, right? That's brilliant. For me, that's my worst nightmare. So my ego goes, you must be crazy, right? Because that's not the network of people that I'm in. Because for me, I like obstacle courses and things like Tough Mudder and stuff like that. That's how my inner child plays. That's how I get physical and do things. But to run a marathon, I'm like, no, don't want to do it. Okay. So that was my response, my words, my opinion. I get to own that. If you're someone that enjoys running, great. But listen to your body. If you feel good after the run, fine. But some quick tips in terms of knowing that your body, it's called allostatic overload. So you have, your liver has the ability to detoxify naturally. You have that. You don't have to detox. Your liver is there to do that. But it might be struggling right now because you've overloaded it with physical, mental, environmental stressors. So if you are at work overloaded or perceived that you're in overwhelm, then your neurological physical system cannot handle that at the moment. It needs to do nothing, right? It needs to stop and breathe. If you've been eating foods like gluten, dairy, and your body doesn't like it, and you've been consuming it constantly for 10 years, and your body's like, oh my goodness, I can't handle this, then your liver's been under stress as well. If you've been taking medication, there was a point when I was taking 17 tablets a day for epilepsy because they thought that's what it was. And actually, the seizures were not linked to what I was born with. I'm glad to say I haven't even got epilepsy anymore now. So that's all from lifestyle changes and things like that. So that's all good. So I'm not on any medication anymore. And I think though taking those medications, all of that stuff over that 10, 12-year period, or as I was growing up, had an impact when my body was in overload. Florence, it sounded like your body was in overload. It was like, I cannot detox naturally fast enough, right? And you're adding more and more. So when it comes to exercise, one, yes, time. You can find time by just going, is it 100% true? And also, are there things you're doing you could let go of to make time? What specifically do you enjoy doing? I call it active fun. Enjoy it. Playing with the kids is physical activity, right? Going for a walk, physical activity. Playing tennis, physical activity. As long as you're a little bit out of breath, it doesn't really matter what you're doing. Just make sure you enjoy it, whatever it is. There's no right or wrong. Yeah. So we want to get our body out of this overload sensation. So going and doing things, luckily in epigenetics, physical exercise actually gets your body back down from stress. So it actually breaks down some of this stress, which is why a lot of people say government recommendations, adults 150 minutes a week, so 3 times a week, right? But some people might start with once a week, where they do 30 minutes of exercise. You may break it down to 3 10-minute exercises a day, right? There is no right or wrong. A lot of teachers are looking for that right, wrong, and there isn't a right or wrong. It's just what works for you, your diary, and how you feel today. Going back to what we were saying at the beginning, being well. Are you being well currently the way that you're living life? Or do you need to set some boundaries? And do you need to say, okay, I'm not going to spend more than this amount of time doing something. I'm going to make sure that I do Pilates once a week because that's less strenuous than lifting heavy weights. And it gives my body the chance to balance itself back out again. So balance for teachers, it's all about that balance.
So I've got your details. I'll just put that up. I mean, you've mentioned so much, and we could probably talk about this, forever. There's so much. I mean, we haven't even spoken about sleep, and that's a whole other area.
Yes.
So there's obviously a lot that goes into physical well-being. And as I said right at the beginning, the Teacher Boss Show is really about helping teachers take back ownership and take back the power of their life over their health, their happiness, and their life. And hopefully the viewers and the listeners have gotten something from today's episode that will really make them think about, am I being well? Going back to that you said, Annabelle, because that's just so powerful. Am I being as well as I can be? Am I making choices that will enable me to be well today, and taking back that responsibility and that ownership for our own well-being, based on our unique circumstances and our body? So thank you so much, Judith and Annabelle, for coming on today. I've really enjoyed today's discussion. And if you would like to connect with them, you can find them on LinkedIn, as well as myself on LinkedIn. And I'm sure they'll be happy to speak to you. So just to let you know about a couple of things that I'm doing really, really quickly. So upcoming at the beginning of February is the Alive to Thrive teacher boss community for teachers who do want to thrive. And I'll be inviting experts like Annabelle and Judith to come in and share their expertise in a more structured way, if they so choose to do so. And it would be lovely to see you there. So that's it from me today, and from the lovely ladies. We look forward to connecting with you on social media. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.